The Ecotour providers are the stewards of the environment, and you suddenly realize that you're much more than a fishing guide. You're actually an ambassador to the Aquatic Preserve. You're teaching people about what's going on out here.
Everyone is affected by the health of Florida's aquatic preserves, given that water permeates and surrounds our state. Florida's submerged lands play important roles in maintaining good water quality, providing diverse marine wildlife including valued nursery areas, and supporting a valued quality of life for millions of residents and visitors. In the 60s, it became apparent that the ecosystems that had attracted so many people to Florida could not support rapid growth without science-based resource protection and management. So state legislators provided extra protection for Estero Bay, and it became Florida's first aquatic preserve. With Estero Bay Aquatic Preserve as the model, Florida's 40 additional aquatic preserves have significant protection to ensure that our most popular and ecologically important underwater ecosystems are cared for forever. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection's Florida Coastal Office manages each of these special places with strategies based on local resources, issues, and conditions. The preserves work to protect and enhance the ecological integrity of the areas, restore areas to their natural condition, engage with local communities and encourage sustainable use and foster active stewardship, and improve management effectiveness through a process based on sound science, consistent evaluation, continual reassessment, and stakeholder involvement.
There's a shark right there. That's a bull shark right there. So that shark right there that we just saw, as well as wading birds, diving birds, seabirds, shorebirds, all those things are very important parts of the environment. And people actually spend a lot of time and a lot of money to actually come down and see these animals in their natural habitats.
The Ecotour providers are the stewards of the environment. They're educating the public on a very grand scale. They have a different group of people every day that they're providing these tours to. So they're a very important avenue of a lot of the messages that we as managers or scientists are trying to portray.
I really think it's important to connect the research we're doing with FWC and relay that to the community. It's really important for everyone to know that this environment out here is definitely protected, needs to stay protected, and we all need to respect all the nature out here, and everything works together, and we need to understand that as a community. And I think doing eco tours like this kind of makes that connection.
To do a tour correctly, you're wanting to present accurate information, but you're wanting to present that in a way that's enjoyable and relevant for your visitors. But more importantly, it's not just the information. They could have stayed home and read that information in a book. They're wanting to get out and enjoy and experience it with you, and to see those pieces of the environment in action directly. And so there's where a good trained interpretive guide not only shares that valuable information, but also provides those experiences and blends it all together for a memorable experience for their visitors.
You're a visitor, basically. Even if you're working out here, you're still just a visitor to this environment. So dolphins, manatees, birds, fish, you really have to respect what's going on around you. And you have to take care. You have to take care of what's going on out here. And that, again, that's something you develop with time. So I encourage people that come out to hopefully realize that right off the bat. And it's hard to teach that. It's hard to teach that respect.
So on our tours, we have a lot of respect for the wildlife. Oftentimes we'll encounter dolphins and they're just not really interested in anything that we are up to. So we observe, we watch, and sometimes those are the best moments because they're just being dolphins, they're doing their natural behaviors. Sometimes they're a little more engaged and they want to come over and they'll swim alongside the boat. We can't prevent that, they just do that. And when we see manatees, we always kill the engine, we stop, we observe. And then I think it's important too to give them their space, give them their time. We never linger around any of the wildlife more than even 5-10 minutes. We keep it very, very short and sweet. So we try to make sure that the guest understands why we do these things as well. We don't want them to just think we're establishing these weird rules for no reason. And oftentimes, once they understand why we're taking those precautions and why we're being so conservative and regulating ourselves around these animals and these islands, they actually appreciate it, and they want to do that as well.
What they come to see are the dolphins. That's the primary focus. Everyone wants to see a dolphin in the wild. And you know, they can go to the places where dolphins are in captivity, but it's just not the same. They come down here and they see these dolphins in their natural habitat, and they'll swim right up next to the boat. They'll be out there jumping in the bay, and you know, the other things in this bay that we get to enjoy are remarkable, and we want to keep it that way, and that's what we help to educate our passengers with. And we do a lot of you know, ecology education while we're out there. We talk about trash, we talk about things that may be on the beach. You know, if they're walking down the beach here and they see that plastic bag tumbling down the beach, pick it up and put it in a trash receptacle, even if it's not your trash, and help the environment a little bit. And we talk about those sea turtles who may eat that bag if it's out floating on the water. We do have a lot of dialogue with our passengers on how to keep the waters clean for years to come. As we go out, we never hit the bottom. You know, we keep the seagrass intact. That's vital to the health of the bay, to both the manatees that are out there eating that seagrass, to the fish that eat the algae off it. And I can go on and on about the seagrass importance in the bay. Very vital. But we also, you know, talk to the people about the good watching of those marine mammals and not disturbing their habitats and the bird habitat. We have a bird island that's very close to here, we call it. It's a rookery island, and it's full of nesting birds right now. And sometimes our passengers are a little frustrated. They want to get close and see those little birds in the nest, but we explain to them, and after we do and say why we can't get, you know, right 5 feet away from the baby nest, then they understand it's why we carry binoculars on our boat. And you can see them just as well with the binoculars as you can pulling right up 5 feet on that nest. And those are things you have to explain sometime to the passengers, and they understand, and they don't always understand when they see a boater go screaming in there on the island. They're like, well, he's there, you know, and those are things we have to explain, that we want to be ethically responsible out there in the bay.
In our Ecotour, we try to teach people about the interconnected species that are out there in the bay, which make up our ecosystems. You know, but it's more than just the species themselves. We try to, you know, touch down on the local seagrasses that we have here. We find it very, very important to tell people about just how important these seagrasses are, as far as, you know, keeping turbidity levels lower, holding the substrate together, providing that foundation, but not only that, providing a very, very important habitat for all of the species that are out there, especially most of the fishes begin their lives in these seagrasses, and so they're critically important, and you know, we try to put some special emphasis on just how important those grasses are.
The things to know when operating in seagrass beds: be aware of the water depth, traverse the seagrass bed at a low speed so as not to cause prop scarring. The prop scar is when a propeller is spinning and it goes through the seagrass bed. It digs down into the substrate. It physically chops up the rhizome system of the seagrasses. And this is very damaging because there have been surveys done after the fact to show that this damage can perpetuate for years on end, and not only that, it can sort of lead to a snowballing effect where the grass is impacted and it moves further and further out. And some areas where you have multiple instances of prop scarring, the seagrass is going to be negatively impacted such that their growth may not be as luxurious as it would be otherwise, and that's going to have an effect upon the animals that rely upon the seagrass bed for their food and habitat.
So it's really important. A lot of times customers are coming from landlocked states and they may have never even seen a dolphin before. And so to educate them on, you know, dolphin biology and natural behaviors, it's really important so that they can go and spread that message and they can teach that to their children.
NOAA Fisheries has developed responsible dolphin viewing guidelines. Some of the best ways to incorporate them are to slowly approach the animals and keep a 50-yard distance.
And also just to keep an eye out for any type of disturbance behaviors when you are viewing these animals in the wild. So things like chuffing, where they exhale very loudly, or tail slaps, or when they purposely try to leave the area and leave your boat. They're definitely clearly disturbed and want to be left alone. Disturbance can occur from a variety of platforms, and it's really important never to corral or herd animals. A lot of times, if an animal is trapped, they have no escape route. So that's really important to keep in mind. Again, anything that disturbs an animal's natural behavior is level B harassment under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So I think one of the most important messages is that when you do responsibly view these animals, that you can really appreciate them engaging in their natural behaviors. They are not wary of your boat, they're not trying to evade that area. And that's, I think, the most special thing, is to see dolphins engaging in foraging or socializing, or a mother-calf pair swimming along. So by responsibly viewing them, I think you can really appreciate them in their natural environment.
So these rookery islands are very special. We do have a few in some of our aquatic preserves, such as Estero Bay, but not as many as we used to. One of the biggest threats that we have to these rookeries is people, actually. These birds actually need to spend their time sitting on those nests, feeding those chicks, and spending that energy to actually raise up those chicks so they can become healthy adults and continue the cycle. If those adults are being flushed off by people getting too close, then they're not going to be able to complete their life cycle. I think it's also important to note that you can actually see these birds at a safe distance without actually impacting, without actually disturbing them. A safe distance, I would say, would probably be at least 300 feet. The average person, with some of the technology that you have today, with some of these digital zoom lenses, at 300 feet you can easily see these birds. And you can also see them with binoculars. The rule of thumb is, if you get close enough that all of a sudden birds are leaving the island, you've gotten way too close. Getting a picture of a fuzzy, cute chick on the nest is simply not worth the life of that bird, which you may be endangering or ending. Just a few minutes of exposure in the hot Florida sun can actually kill these chicks and eggs. They're not actually sitting on these eggs in Florida to keep them warm, they're sitting on them to keep them cool. So we want these birds to be taking care of their families, raising up chicks, and not worrying about us as people.
Approaching rookery islands, we definitely keep our distance. If we notice any sort of alteration in their behavior, if it's because we're there, we pick up and go. We definitely don't linger around the rookery islands. We just do a nice slow cruise by, take some photos, look through some binoculars, and have a chat about them.
Yeah, you really want to make sure like all those birds were acting naturally. And now if you look up at the top here.
We are a full-service marina. We rent boats. We do eco tours in the back bay. Basically, when we rent boats, we give people a education on seagrass beds.
We like to help boaters as much as we can, especially first-timers when they come into the area. Right off the gate, as soon as you come into the ship store, once we finish the paperwork, we provide charts for all the waterways, and we'll go through that. A lot of us are boaters here. We've been boating on this water for years, and we'll help somebody as much as we can, show them where the channels work, how the channel markers work, highlight places where they can and can't go. And so once people kind of get that experience, we make it comfortable for them to get a chance to kind of learn before they go out.
The protection of these seagrass beds is very important. Boat traffic can hurt seagrass beds if you're not operating your boat properly. So that's the reason we educate.
Yeah, the first thing to understand when you start to be a fishing guide is it's not about the fish. And I think that's the hardest thing for all of us. And I know I was the same way. It was all about, let's go get a big snook, let's go get a big red, whatever the cost. And then you suddenly realize that especially since we fish more visitors than we fish locals, the visitors here for a whole different reason. They've seen pictures of dolphins, wild dolphins, manatees, birds, eagles, osprey, and you suddenly realize that you're much more than a fishing guide. You're actually an ambassador to the aquatic preserve. You're teaching people about what's going on out here, and that's the big change. Then the respect comes. you've got to be careful. For example, we have rookeries out here, and by that, what we're talking about with a rookery is that's an area where birds nest. That's an area that if you're going to fish that island, there's nothing wrong with fishing it, but you have to understand that you don't want to disturb nesting birds. You don't want them flushed out of nests, which knocks babies out of nests or knocks eggs out of nests. So you learn those things as you go, and you develop respect for that stuff. You have to. Otherwise, again, you're a visitor. Even if you're a guide out here or you're a fisherman who comes out here every weekend, you have to remember that you're just a visitor to this place. With dolphin, there is a love-hate relationship. They learn quickly. They know all about boats. My advice to people that fish in the backcountry, if you start to have dolphin all around a boat, it's probably a good idea to move, but that is one of the most difficult things to do because the reason you're there and the reason they're there is you're catching fish like crazy. But the reality is you really should do your best to back off and respect them. Seagrass is one of the most important. I always call it the baby nursery because that's really what the seagrass beds are all about. So that's kind of where it all starts. If we ruin that, we're obviously ruining the baby nursery where all of our bait and stuff and small fish come from. Be very careful on the flats. If you don't know your way around, don't go. If you are going to explore, it's best to put the motor up and drop a trolling motor in. Explore the area thoroughly and learn where the deep water is. But yeah, the grass flats are extremely important in the back bays, and you running over them can do nothing but damage them. So it's a good idea to be careful when you're moving around the grass flats. Something that the anglers can do that it's an immediate help is mine their fishing line. It'll wind up in the mangrove. A bird will go in there after something and get tangled in it, and then the bird will either strangle, die, get caught. So be very, very cognizant of what you throw back in the water, especially when it comes to fishing line.
We tried to, touch down on a little bit of everything. I mean, not just the seagrasses as well, but as well the mangroves. I mean, these mangroves are very, very important. Mangroves are one of the most productive ecosystems on our planet here today, and they're also one of the fastest disappearing ecosystems that are out there. So, people need to understand that when these habitats start to deteriorate and disappear, that it does have an impact on your life, no matter where you live. Even if you live in central United States of America, what's happening in the marine environments does have an impact globally.
Mangroves are the guardian of a lot of the reasons why people come to Florida. A lot of our birding species, our nurseries found in the mangroves. Also, Florida is the fishing capital of the world, and a lot of the fish that we like to catch and eat actually spend a lot of their time in the mangroves. So that's a very important part of what makes Florida special is mangroves and fish nurseries. Mangroves are the cheapest way to protect our massive investments in coastal infrastructure, which include roads and also places where people like to live and work. And mangroves help protect us from storm surge that occurs from some of the hurricanes that come through Florida. And that's an important part of what keeps Florida safe.
Well, obviously the Ecotour operators, their entire business is derived from what we have out here. And this is a very sensitive area. We have a lot of protected species, including endangered species like the manatee, a lot of protected bird species. They want to continue to see these animals out here. We got to protect them. Obviously, there's more boaters on the water, there's more tours on the water, and so there has to be a set of ground rules where everyone can have a chance to enjoy these pieces of nature that we have out here. There are obviously laws protecting these, and depending on what species it is and where you are, there are different levels of punishment that can be levied depending on what kind of violations you're involved with. 99% of the Ecotour providers and the people that are just out here recreating obey the law, are great stewards of the environment. However, there's a small percentage that don't care and will do things that damage that environment, and all it takes is a couple of people that can basically ruin an entire area, and make it unfit for the wildlife, where they'll move on or won't have a place to nest. A lot of times some of these rules people don't even understand that are going across the seagrass flat, and if their motor's trimmed down all the way, they're chopping up that seagrass, and it will take years for that to come back. Where all would have taken a little bit of education, know to trim your motor up, pole off, or trolling motor off, and you could have saved a significant environmental damage. but almost everything out here is a protected preserve, and we want to keep it that way. The reason you see so many animals and manatees and dolphins and all those protected wading birds is because this is still a fairly pristine environment, and we'd like to keep it that way.